Hey everybody, Brian Von VA here. Got some bad homebrew rules for you. So, what's the worst you've seen? If you receive necrotic damage, you can't regain hit points in any way until you finish a long rest or receive lesser or greater restoration. You could literally die before 3rd level if you went down after receiving necrotic damage, because there was nothing you could do. Now imagine at even higher levels, someone casting Blight or just dealing necrotic damage every turn. Puzzles have to be figured out by the players, and you cannot use PC skill checks or abilities to solve them. This wasn't stated as a homebrew rule, but it was how the DM ran things. Now I like puzzles, but don't let them hijack the whole game we were already playing. Critical fumbles are something that really divides players. Mostly on Reddit, I see people hating on fumbles and implying that the DM is trying to force them into the game. In my group, the players really enjoy fumbles and want them included. They love it when a big bad enemy fumbles, loses their turn, or takes some kind of penalty. I only allow fumbles on the first attack a creature makes in a round, just to avoid penalizing creatures that make multiple attacks. And I make sure the fumble effects are reasonable and not ridiculous, like, decapitating yourself. But yeah, there's definitely a big difference between my table and what I see online. I would say the speaking as an action rule has to be situational. I was playing a one-shot, and a player decided to try to converse and negotiate with the big bad evil guy during the boss battle. This ground the momentum to a halt, until the DM ruled that she could use her action to say something, not to just have a full-on conversation, or use it to fight. One or two of us had already landed hits, and the big bad evil guy had sent a minion to attack us. So, it was already past the point of a peaceful resolution. However, declaring a war cry as an action is BS! One DM was convinced that magic wielders were underpowered. Are you joking me? So he decided to increase the damage dice of all spells to twice their usual size. Magic missile dealt a frickin' 1d8 damage per missile. A firebolt dealt 6d10. I played a fighter. It was ridiculous. We tried out a new initiative system where you didn't roll for initiative. Instead, everyone decided what actions, movement, and bonus actions they were going to take that turn. You started with 20 initiative points. You subtracted 1 for every 5 feet of movement you took, 5 for every action, and 3 for every bonus action. The idea was that if you weren't doing much in a turn, you could theoretically act faster. For example, if all I did was shoot 1 arrow, I could do that faster than the guy who uses his full movement, makes an attack, and casts a bonus action spell. In practice, however, it was awful. You felt punished for using your full action economy. The worst part was everyone having to decide their turn before anyone actually acted. So, if you chose to attack an enemy, but they were killed or moved out of your range before your turn was completely wasted. The absolute worst rule that I've seen was a character creation one. You used a d20 to roll for stats with no re-rolls, and it was straight down the line for each stat. Additionally, you had to have a minimum of 13 in a stat in order to take a class. Basically the rules for multi-classing. Example, you need a 13 in Dex to be a rogue. The issue was, if you didn't roll higher than an 11, you couldn't choose a class. The highest I rolled was a 10. I would have had to have waited until level 4 to get a class if I got the ASI, but I would have actually had to wait another level because I would be multi-classing. This was my first D&D game, and although I'm a veteran TTRPG player, I noped out of that game fast because it was going to be a miserable experience. I had a DM rule that any critical hits against us would result in our armor breaking. While any critical misses we made would result in our weapons breaking. What? Whoa! This might not have been so bad, except we were constantly starved for gold. He also deliberately broke the barbarian shield because, and I quote, "Barbarians with shields are just too OP." The rule was especially daft when he gave the ranger a suit of adamantine chainmail, the special effect of which is to prevent critical hits. When this was pointed out, he grudgingly said it would take 3 criticals to destroy the armor instead of the usual 1. What a dumb rule! I had a GM who had just finished playing Secret of Evermore on the NES. You know what he loved most about that game, apparently? Having to pay for spell components in order to use magic. You know, that was a weird concept, but I do love that game. He revealed this only after I had rolled up a wizard. Haha. Suddenly, the text for Spell Component Pouch, which automatically provides any component without a listed cost, it just didn't exist. I was expected to buy every single component and keep track of the contents of my pouch on a separate sheet. Every adder's stomach and pinch of colored sand. Anytime he personally didn't like a spell, suddenly its components were no longer available. I took the eschew materials feat with my very next level. It didn't matter, by the way. He assigned costs to every component that didn't have one, nullifying the feat. I played a ranger with firearms once in a one-shot, and everything was fine. Then, when I decided to play this character again in a campaign with the same DM who ran the one-shot, he decided that reloading my gun would cost me an action after every attack. My ability to ignore the loading property with a feat, which I already had in the one-shot and used without any issues, was suddenly invalid. I tried to argue that this was a bad rule, and the discussion lasted multiple hours over an entire week online. In the end, the DM stood by his original ruling because it's more realistic. These are the times of flintlock, not modern weapons. So what else were you expecting? Just use a different weapon if you don't like it. I never ended up participating in that campaign. That gun, by the way, only dealt 1d10 damage and was an important backstory item for my character. My time has come. Rest in peace to you then, I suppose. I had this one DM who decided to completely revamp the AC system armor class because he didn't agree with the use of dexterity for AC, or how armor worked in general. It ended up being such a convoluted mess that the first fight after the change took 6 hours of real time. So, a full session. To give you a reference point for just how scuffed it was, the average AC was floating around the mid-20s, while attack rolls remained unchanged. If you missed with an attack, you still dealt damage depending on whether you hit 0.5 AC or 0.75 AC. Even if you were a dex-based character, you absolutely needed to rush con, because now it impacted both AC and HP. Well, our rogue wasn't pleased. Granted, we were all displeased and immediately told the DM as much, but he was stubborn, and that rule persisted for 3 more sessions before he relented. The game fell apart shortly after. The worst rule I've seen is applying the automatic fail of a nat 1 and the automatic success of a nat 20 to skill checks. It's not a deal breaker, mind you, but it tends to be frustrating for both DMs and PCs. It means that no matter how trained you are in a certain skill, you can always fumble it like a commoner. On the other hand, things that are supposed to be really difficult can be resolved simply because a character got lucky and rolled a nat 20. Unless the DM and the group are prepared for the utter chaos that a 5% chance of stats not meaning anything for every roll brings, it will be frustrating. Even when you are prepared for it, you are knowingly giving Murphy's Law free reign over the campaign. This means that it's never a matter of if, but when your rolls hit those numbers and the story shifts dramatically. Most of the really bad ones I've seen are from the 80s with AD&D. I'll explain the ones that rely on quirks of that version's rules. Spellcasters could cast spell levels equal to their character level. Oh god. For example, a 3rd level wizard could use Fireball because it's a 3rd level spell. Extremely unbalanced 10th level spells. For example, Nuke, which dealt hundreds of points of damage over an area of several miles. Explanation to help understand. First edition AD&D had a mechanic that controlled how many spells a magic user, such as a wizard in modern terms, could understand and have in their spellbook. The higher their intelligence, the more spells of each level they could understand and scribe into their spellbook. Now, as a technical note, it was possible to add spells even if the character couldn't understand them, but it was expensive and served little purpose in the game. The chart in the player's handbook indicated that a magic user with an intelligence of 10 could learn as many as 7 spells of each level at most, while a magic user with an intelligence of 17 could know as much as 14 spells of each level. The homebrew. I encountered a DM who homebrewed that this number was the number of spell slots for each level instead of the upper limit on spells known. If a magic user with an intelligence of 17 gained the ability to cast 3rd level spells, they could cast 14 of them per day. Use of the Rollmaster critical hit tables in D&D. Now, for those not familiar with Rollmaster, think lots of crippling and long-term injuries, including insta-kill results. Getting hit with a mace could lead to a broken bone, internal bleeding, stun, and worse. Rollmaster had extensive rules to handle this stuff. Not so much in D&D. Re-rolling hit points every game day. For example, a 4th level fighter would roll 4d10 every game day upon waking up. The total, modified for a high constitution, would be their hit points for that day. Some days it just didn't pay to get out of bed. Curiously, I've heard anecdotes that this rule was sometimes used by Gygax in his early games. It might just be the first homebrew rule ever. It's worth noting that while I've seen a few of these individually over the years, I once saw a DM who used all 5 of these rules. His campaign was really something different, and probably lasted very, very little amounts of time. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and if you want to help us keep the lights on and our bellies full of food, feel free to drop a membership. You don't have to, but you do get access to outtakes, other goodies, and early access videos. We love you all. Please be safe and happy out there, and remember, let us know about those bad homebrew rules that you've seen. Toodaloo.